Cinema creates the illusion of a narrative, the illusion of the character, and at the same time, the films I investigated showed this kind of particular attention to materiality of the human body. So I wrote about the hapticity in cinema, about medical interest in the body, and about objectification of the body. So again, this is part of this kind of wider project that was adapted for the purposes of this presentation. So let's start from a short introduction of Alexander Sokurov's family trilogy. The trilogy is preoccupied with the surface of the body, and considered together, mother and son, father and son, and Alexandra constitute a particular exploration of skin, because this is, when we think about human body, this is effectively what we see on the cinematic screen. Before moving on to analyzing individual films, I would like to briefly discuss them as a whole. Additionally, as an introduction to my argument, I will look at diverse functions and readings of skin. So the films constituting Alexander Sokurov's family trilogy are interlinked stylistically and narratively. The stories of all three films are simple and sparse. So we've got a son who tenders to his dying mother in Mother and Son, a father and son exploring their emotional bond, knowing that the latter will soon leave, and in Father and Son, and a grandmother visiting her grandson, most probably for the last time. So this is Alexandra. The slow pace of those films and long takes invite viewers to contemplate a series of tableaux and place kind of less focus on the evolving story. Thus, they encourage an audience to meditate on the aesthetic quality of the image. One of the facets of those films is a series of encounters with the physicality of the body, particularly skin, or rather its image. So a number of the discourses that skin lends itself to are intertwined in all three films constituting the family trilogy. Mother and Son, Father and Son, and Alexandra consider the surface of the body from multiple perspectives, as an object of medical interest, as a sensuous border of the body, as a surface with a unique texture, and as a carrier of identity. So each section of this paper focuses on a specific part of Sokurov's family trilogy and the reading of the skin central to it. So let's start off from a short look at skin. Human skin is the subject of many discourses. As an outside layer of the body, it is an object of interest of both science and humanities. And according to Jennifer Barker, both pleasure and horror arise from the skin's function as boundary, as something that keeps the carnality within us concealed and the carnality of the world at bay, but also as something that brings us into contact with the things in us and around us at the same time. The skin, then, puts us in an ambivalent place on the border of self and other, inside and outside, and proper and improper. Now, if we look at skin, skin can be examined as an organ with important biological functions. It can be considered from a scientific point of view and read through purely non-cultural interests. So it's composed of different layers. It's the largest organ of the body, which acts as a two-way barrier, protecting the viscera, and is in the front line of the defenses of the body. Skin constitutes the window to the body. It can be a site of communication for medical conditions, for example, through bruises or rashes, and thus is often the first point of examination and diagnosis. Now, skin can be read as a text or canvas onto which our identity is inscribed. It is to a large extent equated with identity, so in particular age, gender, race, and beauty. It carries the marks of life experience and can be read as a text, revealing a personal history. So if we think about scars, wrinkles, or pictorial inscriptions such as tattoos. Now, skin both conveys stimuli to the outside world and receives them as a site of momentary sensation and sensuality. As a border, skin is a site of communication with the outside world, so the world outside to our bodies. It is also the locus of contact with other bodies, and as such, it is associated with touch, as well as sensations such as cold or pain. It is also perceived as container for the inside of the body, so blood, bones, muscles, and internal organs, and in more metaphorical sense, for memory and experience. Now, additionally, as a surface, skin can be distinguished through purely visual characteristics in terms of its own texture, so firmness, dryness, roughness, pores and hair, and color. So we can talk about tone, skin pigmentation, discoloration, and blemishes. And this is what the first part of my paper revolves around. So the first part of my paper focuses around mother and son. My interest is beyond the conventional representation of skin in contemporary culture as a glossy bodily surface. So if we think about mainstream cinema or about, for example, advertisements. Instead of inscribing skin within a metaphorical discourse, in this part, I concentrate on the objectified surface of the body, stripped of representational value. So not a costume, but rather bare matter. Skin is here read as an object of purely aesthetic visual appreciation, a raw material used to construct an image with a variety of colors and textures. So let's start from the few images from the film. Mother and Son, the film opening Sokurov's family trilogy, is a poetic tale of a son who tends to his dying mother. The story takes place within a single day, during which they begin a journey through an ethereal landscape. Most shots in Mother and Son constitute broad, painterly panoramas of landscape. The figures of the characters are lost in their overwhelming nature. Less frequently, the camera frames their bodies in medium shots. Throughout almost the whole film, it never comes closer. So one example here is the sequence where the son carries the sick mother to take her for a walk. So it's this particular image. The characters are presented as if they were traveling through a painting and can be distinguished from the background only through their movement. The rich texture of the surface, the limited color palette, and reduced depth of field made the silhouette and the ground resolve into a single plane. The landscape is in tune with the human form, merged with its surroundings. So the bodies of the character are just another object in the overwhelming nature. They don't take the central position. Now, the emphasis of the character in relation to the background can be also observed in the scenes depicting the mother against the background of conspicuous surfaces. After the son sits her on the bench beneath the tree, so this is the image over there, their bodies and clothes in varied hues of gray and brown appear to merge with the background. Later, when she rests among the crops, her pale face echoes the color of the field in the background. So again, the human figure is never central. Long shots, medium shots, and its nature that takes prominence. This part, it's basically such a depiction of human form take about 9/10 of the film, and they have frequently been compared to paintings of Caspar David Friedrich. Now let's take a look at the last scene of the film, which differs, which contrasts with the rest. Sorry, I need to. So the last 3 minutes of the film, a scene which takes place, which closes the film and takes place after the mother's son, it's an extreme close-up, so the technique which sharply contrasts with previous depictions of the characters in the film, with their bodies as either lost in overwhelming landscape or merged with its surrounding. So in this scene, the skin feels the screen and receives the full attention of the viewer. The surfaces of individual bodies, that of a young son and the elderly mother, become layers of each other and compose different parts of the image. The depiction is held on screen for a few minutes while the audience is invited to meditate on the varied hues and textures of the character's skin, a notion more readily associating with painting or photography rather than cinema. The film recalls the hilly scenery it presents in the preceding scene, with the image constructed by varied geographical features. However, the geography of the landscape is replaced by that of a body. By presenting in close-ups contrasting surfaces of the body, Sokurov creates a skinscape, as opposed to landscape, composed of different layers of skin. So in the final scene of mother and son, the close-ups freeze the flow of the narrative, and the bodies of the characters are placed in focus. Such technique, adapted in the film, invite a mode of viewing that is different from the traditional cinematic experience. So the presentation of the physical properties of the body and the emphasis of its materiality, here the human skin, rather than the characters we can identify with. Now let's move on to father and son. So father and son includes not only haptic depictions of the bodily surface, that is emotionally charged close-ups of skin, as discussed, for example, by Laura Marks or Vivian Sobczak, but also features medical imagery portraying the body without skin. So through the introduction of medical themes, this second part of the family trilogy moves towards the examination of skin as an object of scientific interest. The surface of the body in father and son is able to mask and deceive. The father appears to be a perfectly healthy individual, but when a medical diagnosis penetrates the skin, it reveals traces of a serious wound. Now, father and son, as I mentioned before, is a story of a war veteran father and his son Alexei, a cadet in a military school. We know that the son is soon going to leave his father, so those are the last moments they can spend together. In the film, Sokurov pursues his occupation with human corporality by focusing on the sculptured body of two soldiers. The exploration of them as physical figures begins with the opening scene, which we'll see in a second. Throughout the film, we watch the father weightlifting on rooftops or the son stepping out of the shower. Alexei, so the son, is observed during martial art training or exercises on the ladder. The father and son play football and talk about their physical fitness. Their muscular physiques are accentuated by the sleeveless tops and tight t-shirts. The camera work and light also emphasize the physical aspect of the character bodies. So they are usually presented bathed in bright yellows and oranges and frequently in close-up shots. So this is this kind of the gaze of the camera which objectifies the body, but this time it's a male body. Now, the opening scene of the film is the recollection of the dream, which links us back to mother and son with images of similarly stretched silhouettes. So let's take a look at this fragment of the film. This is the opening of scene of father and son, and a scene presents a certain incompleteness. First, it is the lack of images. We watch black screen, then distorted close-ups. So initially, the camera comes close as if probing the body. Close-ups index proximity. Akin to the scene of mother and son discussed earlier, the exteriors of two different bodies create layers that construct the image. The eye lingers on the corporeal surface that surfaces that fill the screen. With these skinscapes, the close-ups of the father and son's body register their intimacy as well as the muscularity of their silhouettes. However, here, while the focus is still on skin, the image is blurred and presented in soft focus. While in mother and son, the extreme close-ups of skin with its texture coming to fore referenced the medium of painting. Here it reflects the tactile experience of the characters, inscribing it in the discourse of hapticity in cinema. Now, the second part of the family trilogy begins with the investigation of the outside of the body as the site of sensuality and contact with another body, as well as cover for the body interior. However, as we learn later in the film, the body of the father, on the surface an example of health and fitness, hides a lung injury. Father and son considers in this sense, father and son considers the surface of the body as a cover, so its appearance belying the condition of that which is beneath, by introducing internal images of the body. So we've got an X-ray and an anatomical poster. Now, the first is referenced when Alexei returns home from the military academy, and he finds an X-ray of his father's ribcage. The medical photograph is first presented in close-up with the hand of the son traveling across its surface. The screen is filled with a black and white image of the corporeal interior. As the hand of the son moves slowly across the surface of the X-ray, almost caressing it, the film juxtaposes the outer part of the body with its inside. The X-ray image denotes certain impersonal, that is medical truths about the body. Here is the father's war injury. The introduction of elements from the domain of medicine, detached and distance, turns the body into an object of scientific analysis. By penetrating the body, medical technologies such as Röntgen rays offer views that are unavailable to the naked eye. Skin ceases to be the boundary of the visible. The gaze of the observer is able to reach deeper. In the discussed scene, father and son juxtaposes corporeal depths with the surface of the body. Now, another scene in the father and son offers a different comment on the medical perception of the body. After a game of football between the father and the son, Alexei is shown standing almost still in front of the image depicting an écorché figure. The picture of a flayed human form portrays a gymnast on rings, his skin removed in order to demonstrate the anatomical position of muscles in the human body. The écorché figure is situated between the artistic, so individual and subjective, and the scientific, so distance and objective. The body devoid of its protective surface recalls the function of skin as an envelope for the corporeal depths. With a complete human face as the locus of self, and this is what we can see, might be quite blurred, and a prop, so the rings, which place the body in context and simultaneously appear to the imagination of the audience, the picture points to early anatomy drawings with their distinctive aesthetic take on medicine. Some examples from earlier centuries, and also quite a recent example of Gunther van Hagens and his anatomical depictions. So father and son probes the body from varied proximities, from extreme close-ups, registering the breath and the skin of the characters in the first scene, through exploration of what is concealed under the skin in an X-ray and anatomical schema, to the investigation of the whole muscular figure of the characters as encountered in everyday experience. The film contrasts the body caught in haptic expression with the scientific detachment offered by scientific images. Such penetration of the inside and the outside, as well as the juxtaposition of the haptic and the medical, calls attention to the material and biological dimension of the human body, and thus brings out the trace of the physical presence on screen. Now, Alexandra, the last film in the trilogy, inquires into skin as a culturally charged border onto which we inscribe our identity, so here gender, occupation and age. The surface of the body is a container for memory. The life experience of titular Alexandra and her personal history are transcribed onto her skin, mature and wrinkled. So this section also examines skin as a site of momentary sensations and interactions. I'm conscious of time, so I will have to run rather quickly through Alexandra. So Alexandra continues the theme of the father and son, this time in a Russian army camp in Chechnya. It's a portrait of a grandmother who visits his her grandson, Denis, who is a captain in the Russian army. The elderly woman travels together with a group of military men and stays with them in the army camp. In this male-only domain, she becomes a symbol of femininity and warmth. So the film is founded on contrast. We've got the age Alexandra and frequent exploration of her wrinkled skin, and that are juxtaposed with young masculine corporalities of the soldiers. And a few crucial scenes, the opening scene of the film when the camera kind of dances around Alexandra, filming her from different proximities and from different angles. The next scene is filmed in a train when Alexandra travels with other soldiers, and the camera cuts back and forth from the images, kind of portraits of her and images of the soldiers. It frequently stops showing faces or bodies of the soldiers, and again allowing us to examine them in close proximity. Alexandra is also the film that is obsessed with touch and with textures. So we have a lot of extreme close-ups of objects, and particularly of human bodies. So not only faces, but also hands, feet, often interacting with other objects. And frequent images of juxtaposed textures. So not only skin of Alexandra and the soldiers, but also, for example, human skin as juxtaposed with wood and steel. And also, although Alexandra is set in the masculine domain of an army camp, the film features numerous scenes presenting or alluding to touch. I think the clearest one, apart from the probing camera, is the scene in which grandmother begins unplaiting her hair, and Denis helps her. In two almost identical sequences, the camera closes on his hands and follows the movements on his fingers in extreme close-ups as they play with Alexandra's hair. The image composed of hair and skin on the background of textile fills the frame. The focus is on textures, so that of Alexandra's dry hair, her dress, and that of rough skin of Denis's hands. After a while, when the haptic returns to the optical, we can see the woman in the embrace of her grandson. So, with the opening scene exploring the body of the main character from different angles and proximities, Alexandra establishes itself as a film preoccupied with the body. The presentation of the titular character among the contrasting corporalities at the beginning of the film, those of Russian soldiers, calls attention to the physical properties of the body, interpreted not only as a vessel for representation. Such an approach is strengthened by the film's investigation of the proximal sense of touch. So just to sum up, the family trilogy analyzes the surface of the body from the divergent point of view. Mother and Son creates a painterly landscape in which a close-up of skin fills the screen and invites the viewer to explore its textures and hues. Father and Son considers the outside layer of the body from a medical point of view and juxtaposes it with a perception of skin as a sensual site of contact with another body. Alexandra explores the surface of the body as a text that reveals one identity. It also appeals to senses connected with skin, that is touch. All three films viewed together create what could be interpreted as an orchestrated search for the trace of the material body in the cinema. Additionally, mother and son, father and son, and Alexandra investigate skin from the different distances and proximities imposed by painterly appreciation, medical interest, or haptic exploration. Through the extreme close-ups persistent in all three films, they meditate on the surface of the body. Such an orchestrated preoccupation with skin emphasizes the importance of the material. So thank you for listening, and sorry for overlining.